Hello everybody, this is Loci or WayOfLoci, and welcome to Know It Podcast. Here it is my job to interview the extraordinary gamers out there, whether that be challenge runners, those who have completed games in entirety without taking a single hit, speedrunners completing games in mere minutes that would normally take hours, and those who completed the games entirely blindfolded, or the amazing YouTubers and streamers out there producing engaging, entertaining content online. Today's guest is RikoKSB, that's RIKO_KSB on YouTube, Twitch, and Twitter. Riko is a master in the Crash Bandicoot speedrunning scene, having completed many world record speedruns in the original trilogy, the N-Sane remake trilogy, Crash Bandicoot 4, It's About Time, and many titles outside the main series, including Twinsanity, Crash Bash, Wrath of Cortex, and many more. He's also commentated several times at AGDQ, that's Awesome Games Done Quick, a charity speedrunning fundraising event, and has been featured on IGNs Devs React series, a series where game developers react to speedrunners completing speedruns of their games, having showcased both the demo and the full game of Crash Bandicoot 4. In this conversation, we're going to pretty much every Crash game out there, the main series, the spin-offs, the racing games, the GBA games, pretty much all of it. We're going to Riko's interest in the series and approach to speedruns, the huge impacts Riko had in the Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, or Sorcerer Stone in America, speedruns, and what's the appeal of full completion speedruns of the Crash series apart from maybe Crash 4, which we're going to, and much more. I hope you enjoyed this conversation with RikoKSB. Right, Riko, I appreciate taking time out for this. Welcome to the podcast. How's it going, man?
Going really well. Thank you for inviting me. I really appreciate it.
No worries at all. We're going to go into all things Crash related and other stuff, but let's start right at the beginning. What was the first Crash game you were introduced to, and what Crash game was the first you went into speedrunning with?
So my answer for both of those is the second game, Crash Bandicoot 2. That was actually the first video game I ever owned as a kid in 1997 when it came out. So it's kind of just been a game that I've always had a large history with. It was like the game I always sunk the most time into when I was younger. I had a habit of like at least once per year just going through the game 100%. And then just one year, I think it was like 2013, 2014. I did my annual 100% playthrough and I beat it in less than a day. So I realized that, okay, this is becoming too easy for me. I'm going through the game way too quickly at this point. What is something I could do to find more enjoyment from this game again? And so I just decided, well, what if I just looked up Crash Bandicoot 2 speedrun? And that was kind of my introduction to not just Crash speedrunning, but sort of speedrunning as a whole. I had known that it was a thing beforehand, and I think I had seen some like random like Super Mario 64 run in the past, but I'd never really looked into it. So like when I looked up Crash Bandicoot 2 speedrun, I got the video that was the world record at the time, which was 129 by Mr. Bean 35,000 VR, who's more known for Mario Kart these days. And I just watched that video and I was blown away. I was like, oh my god, I am terrible at this game. And so like that just like lingered in the back of my head for about another year. And then the next summer I looked it up again and saw that he'd brought the time down to 1 hour and 20. And after watching that video, I was like, I want to do this. I want to be able to play the game the way he does. And that's just kind of where it started.
So what was the first steps going into it? Obviously, like newbie speedrunner, what was the first steps approach you? Was it like copying the strats he was doing, or?
So I definitely, the convenience of that video is that it was commentated. So he went in depth into explaining what exactly he was doing and how everything worked. So I used that video as a baseline to just understand how the mechanics worked. And then I think I sat down and one day just on an emulator on my laptop just ran through the game and just tried to see how fast I could go through it. And I think I finished the game in like 2 hours and 30 minutes of around that time. And then once I got that down and got like a second run under my belt, I kind of just looked into what I needed to record the video. So I downloaded LiveSplit, I downloaded OBS, and from there I just kind of did some offline runs for a few years before I started streaming them.
And was it all focused on Crash 2?
Initially, yes. My focus was entirely on Crash 2 and specifically 100%. I think I started to pick up doing like the other categories, like no game over abuse, a little while in, but for the longest time my focus was exclusively 100%.
What was the appeal of that category?
So Crash as a series is kind of just known for being games that are, for the most part, at their best when you 100% them. And I think Crash 2 is the biggest example of that. The way things are laid out, the way that you really have to do very minimal backtracking if you know exactly what you're doing. And just the way the flow of the levels feels when you're breaking every box, it really feels like that game was designed to be 100%ed. And really, if you go and just do like, an any percent no gamer reviews run, which is probably the easiest category to get into. And it's still definitely a fun category because it is Crash 2 at the end of the day, and the movement is just a really great part of that run. It really just feels so empty compared to 100% in the game. You know, when you're going for everything, there's just so much more going on, so many more tricks, so much more intricacies in the movement, and it just feels right to 100% the game.
So what's like an efficiency thing within like Crash speedrunning? Because I guess in a normal playthrough, it'd be you play through it once to get it, you play through it again for the boxes, or you play through it probably several times to get the boxes, and then the time trials. What do you do differently in a speedrun to make it more efficient?
So generally, you want to obviously visit every level at the minimum number of times needed. So in the case of Crash 2 specifically, and for most of the levels in Crash 1, you're only going to visit every level once. There's some levels, like there's a single level in Crash 2 that you have to visit twice, and then in Crash 1, I think there's like 3 or 4 of them that you have to visit twice, and that's just because that's the way the game is designed, is that you have to revisit some of them later when you've unlocked more things. When you factor in the time trials from Crash 3 and on, most levels end up being double visits because you have to, get the crystal and gem and then go back for the relic. But, in the casual situation where, most casual players on a first, second, third playthrough of the game are going to go through and, they're going to get the crystal and then they're eventually going to go back for the gem. In a speed run, you're going to get the crystal and the gem at the same time because that's just the most efficient way to do it.
So what was the one level example in Crash 2 that you have to go back for?
You have to go back to do Air Crash a second time, which is level 7. And the reason for that is on first visit is actually impossible to get the box gem because Air Crash is just like filled to the brim with secrets. There's a secret exit, which takes you to how you're supposed to get the red gem in Snowgo. And then there's also a secret entrance, which you can only unlock from Bear Down in Warp Room 3. And that secret entrance has a bunch of crates and it also has the nitro detonator. So it is just impossible to finish Air Crash on the first playthrough. So on the first pass, you get the crystal and you get the Death Route gem. And then you take the secret exit to unlock the alternate path to Snowgo. And then at the end of Warp 3, you go back to Air Crash and finish it.
So I was just going through the route in mind then. Sorry, go on.
Yeah. And then like Crash 1 is just like there's just some levels that require colored gems that you can't possibly have at the point where you do those levels. So you just double back to them at the end of the run.
So which Crash game was the one you ventured into next after Crash 2?
After Crash 2, I think the natural step that a lot of people probably took, and the one that I took, is that I ventured into Crash 3.
Was that the more popular game or more interesting game as opposed to Crash 1?
It's hard to say. Crash 3, so all the Crash games have like periods of like being dormant or being really active, and I would say that Crash 2 is consistently the most active as a speedrun, and right now it's like one of the most active Crash games at the moment. But Crash 3 definitely has its fans, at least from like a viewer perspective, just because Crash 3 is like one of the most beloved games in the series. As a speedrun, it's actually very different from Crash 2, and I think that's one of the things that I really like about Crash is that even individual games, even if they're not spin-offs, like all the platformers, the way their run works is very different. Like the movement tech is different and all that, and I think that's really cool because it makes Crash 3 feel very different from 2. And Crash 3 was definitely one where I wasn't as fond of it for like several years. It was only really till about like January of last year where I truly started to enjoy Crash 3 to the same level that I enjoyed Crash 2. Just because it's such a different experience. The way the game flows, the physics are different, the movement tech is different, so you have to get used to that. And there's definitely a lot more situations where it feels like you're fighting the game, and you like that's what made it so frustrating for me to try to learn. Is just like it feels way more punishing. But like once you like truly understand what is going on with it, I find it just as fun, if not more fun, than Crash 2.
It's interesting to mention the movement mechanics because I went based on a nostalgia trip a couple of years back when they brought out the N-Sane Trilogy, which was the remastered of the original trilogy, and was interesting going in order and going, oh wow, they put in so much in Crash 2 compared to Crash 1, and then the
definitely
in Crash 3. What's if there was a singular reason or a couple of reasons for why Crash 2 is the most popular one in terms of speedrunning, I guess?
I think at least out of the original trilogy, and probably across this like the entire series, Crash 2's movement is the flashiest. So from a spectator perspective, I feel like it's the most popular because of that. Like because the movement in Crash 2, they use a glitch movement called the neutral slide spin, where if you do a slide, and so normally if you do a slide spin, when you do the spin, Crash goes back down to his normal walking speed. But if during the slide you let go of all your like directional inputs, so you just go neutral and then you spin from there, the spin carries the slide speed. So basically for throughout an entire Crash 2 run, you're just flying through levels at constant slide speed because you're just like sliding, spinning, sliding, spinning, sliding, spinning, and you just fly through levels. And it's just so fascinating to watch it be done well. So when you go to Crash 3, there's something similar, but really not quite the same, called the neutral slide jump, which is the same idea, but you do it into a slide jump instead of a slide spin. And it's not as flashy because, you know, you see Crash like fly through the air. It's not immediately noticeable how much speed you're gaining from it. It slows down a little bit before you land. And then combined with the fact that about 50% of Crash 3 is vehicles compared to Crash 2 being primarily platforming, it's understanding why Crash 2 is so popular compared to it and why people are more interested in getting into it. As far as 100% completion goes, Crash 2 is also a lot shorter than Crash 3 because Crash 3 having the time trials kind of just nearly doubles the length of the run compared to Crash 2 and 1.
Speaking of the N-Sane, what was your... Because I imagine you speedran the original games for a long period of time. How was the experience going into... both from like a nostalgia factor and going into the speedruns of the N-Sane Trilogy?
So I definitely went into the N-Sane Trilogy with an open mind. I went in knowing that it was not going to be at all like the original games as a speedrun. I would have been very shocked if they kept stuff like the neutral slide spin in the N-Sane Trilogy, and they didn't. They carried over some things. Like there's another tech where if you do a slide jump and you spin during the jump, you get a bit more height. They actually did carry that over into the N-Sane Trilogy, which was pretty cool. But most of the core movement mechanics were taken out. And I went in and I was like, okay, so like starting out, this is not going to be as good of a speedrun as the original games. They've had years of development behind them. I want to go into this and see what we can find with it. And you know, the first few months were a little slow, especially in terms of like Crash 2. You know, a lot of people were going hard at Crash 1 just because it was like the most straightforward one to get into. And then like people were going in at Crash 3 in the N-Sane Trilogy because a lot of just glitches and skips were found in like the remake of 3 really quickly. But Crash 2 was kind of just, you know, left alone. Nobody was really messing with it. And then eventually about, you know, a few months in, we did find a movement tech that just sped up both Crash 2 and Crash 3. And from there, at this point, they've evolved to being completely different speedruns from the originals, to the point where it's really not fair to compare them because they're just different experiences. But I definitely was... I was one of those people who was like, okay, I'm not going to immediately dismiss the N-Sane Trilogy as being inferior because we don't know what we're going to find with them. They're being rebuilt from the ground up, so they really shouldn't be considered the same games outside of just having the same levels.
I found when I was doing like research prep for this, when you played the demo and you had this twit longer going into specific details or changes to do with the runs for the N-Sane Trilogy from the demo, and it was from, I believe it was only a few hours of playing the demo. Yeah. It was so detailed in the differences between like the original series and the trilogy.
I found a GameStop that just had the demo and I just stood there and played it for hours and just tried to figure out what I found was different.
Do you have a preference now towards running the original series or the N-Sane, or is it for different reasons?
So for a while after the N-Sane Trilogy came out, I would have said I preferred running the N-Sane Trilogy. Nowadays, I've doubled back to preferring the original games. I actually kind of did a soft retire from the N-Sane Trilogy about a year ago just because I felt like I had exhausted all of my energy into it and kind of just accomplished everything I wanted to. I do still occasionally go back to Crash 3 in the N-Sane Trilogy because I do think that speedrun is incredible. Both the any percent run and the 108% run of the remake are fantastic runs, and there's just so much untapped potential, especially in 108%. Any percent's been pretty optimized at this point, but for the most part, I would say these days, I definitely enjoy the original Crash 2 more than the remake of Crash 2. And then for Crash 1, it kind of goes both ways. I enjoy both, but I think I find myself enjoying Crash 1 on like the original a bit more, and then Crash 3, I really just I like both of them. I can't pick which one I like more. They're just both good for different reasons.
Is it, I guess, probably a weird question, but from my perspective, like going back to like Crash 1, it was a humbling experience because I was like, oh, this Crash was like this game I played as a kid, and I'd forgotten how precise the platforming was, especially for Crash 1. And I'm just interested, like, how do you balance that with speed? I know that's the whole point of a speed run, but especially in my mind for like Crash 1, where the platforming I feel was a lot more precise than Crash 2 and 3 when they added a lot more. Yeah, I guess how do you balance that, or does it just get to the point at world record level it's just YOLOing with obviously the precise strats?
I think with a lot of speedruns, and Crash 1's no exception, it really just boils down to building the muscle memory to kind of just be able to expect exactly what you're supposed to do. One of my best friends is the world record holder for Crash 1 100%, Tet W, and he just has that game down to like a performance. He's just always constantly aware of like how things are going to be, what he has to do in each level, and if you watch him play that game with like the sheer precision he goes through, it's beautiful. And I really just think that's what it is. Even though there's definitely a lot of precise platforming in Crash 1, a lot of that in the N-Sane trilogy is a result of the way the jumping and falling physics are in the remake are slightly different from how they are in the originals. So you're demanded of a bit more precision than you needed in the originals, but the originals are definitely not like imprecise. You still need to be good at platforming to get through the original Crash 1. And it's definitely, again, like with a lot of things with speedrunning, it's a lot of memorization. It's a lot of building the muscle memory to know exactly what you want to do in every situation. So it's just like with more time you put into it, you just learn how to gradually go faster.
Mentioned that's starting out, it was the 100% category that they enjoyed the most. Do you have a preference in like the whole host of games, and we'll go to a few of them that you do? Do you have a preference towards longer, or I guess fully completed runs, or the more towards the 80%?
When it comes to Crash, I definitely tend to prefer the 100% runs. I think that is, again, a case just the way most Crash games are designed. They are at their most fun and most interesting when you go for full completion. Something I've realized whenever I try to branch out into something that's not Crash is that is not a rule that applies to other games necessarily. There's definitely been plenty of games where I've tried to just get into 100% and been like, wow, this is just not fun. What
would be an example of a game that was of that caliber?
The two examples I can think of, a more recent one for me would probably be Jak and Daxter.
Okay.
I had eyed that game for a while and could not figure out why so many people from what I perceived from talking to people, it felt like a lot of Jak 1 runners did not like 100%, and I just couldn't figure out why. And then like when I sat down and tried to learn it, I first tried to learn 100%, and it was like, there's so much to take in, because you have to get like every orb, every power cell, every fly. You have to remember so much, and if you miss one thing, you just have to go find it, and that's just so hard. And then, so I eventually like tried to learn like the easier, like the not 100% category, the no lava tube skip category. And that was definitely way nicer to get into. I didn't end up sticking with it just because it didn't really click with me, but that was like my first wake-up call where 100% is not always good. And another game, I haven't tried to learn this one myself, but it's a similar structure to Jak and Daxter, is a friend of mine picked up Toy Story 2. And I asked him why he liked any percent more than 100%, because he told me, he was like, Toy Story 2 is the first game I've played where I don't like the 100% run compared to any percent. So I asked him why, and he said there's just like any percent, you just take out 10 of the Pizza Planet tokens that are just the most annoying. And I was like, okay, I get that, because like Crash is much more linearly structured than other 3D platformers. It really just feels like a 2D platformer, but they made it a 3D game. So your point is to get from point A to point B, and you can pick up stuff on the way, and that just adds to it, or you can just get to the end. And for Crash, it's just more fun to pick up everything on the way for the most part. And then like the other game that I ran where I think ultimately I thought the any percent run was better than the 100% run was the PS1 version of Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. And that's just because when you try to go for everything in that game for 100%, it just becomes really annoying, because there's a lot of mini games, there's a lot of RNG, there's a lot of places where you can just get really hard punished. So I felt like the any percent run, which was just more skip heavy, just was more interesting because of that.
I do want to query about the Harry Potter runs, but I'm going to leave that for a bit later.
All right.
Although, a point that just made me think, mentioning the Toy Story runs, just got like nostalgia of when movies came out and there was always a game edition of it. And I think
that was a good time.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
really do that anymore.
it just doesn't happen these days.
Yeah, don't know. I remember like every time a Harry Potter game, like they all went right to the end, and then every Disney film, everything like that.
Yeah. But yeah, for Crash games, I definitely tend to prefer 100%. If there's an any percent run for a Crash game that I really enjoy, there's something about it that makes it stick out for the most part. Usually, like there's some major trick in it that makes it more interesting than, okay, you're just going from point A to point B. Or there's just like a huge number of skips that make it interesting.
With the N-Sane Trilogy, is there a difference between, because I saw they were separated as categories on speedrun.com, between the console and the PC version?
Yeah, so that was splitting the boards between PC and console is something that had been talked about for a while, but didn't actually happen until about last year. So the PC version is the only version of the game that can run at 60 FPS.
Okay.
And I don't know why, but for some reason, Crash's movement speed and his falling speed are tied to the frame rate. So at 60 FPS, he runs a little bit faster and he falls a little bit faster, which for one, moving a bit faster is just automatically already good. But the primary movement tech in the N-Sane Trilogy is the Hobbs slide, which it's named after Jay Hobbs, who's the guy who discovered it. He didn't name it. Throw that as a disclaimer first. But the way it works is if you do a slide spin and you jump and you touch the ground before the spin animation ends, as long as you can do a perfect chain of slide spins from there, so you never drop the inputs, you just get this really fast speed boost. And I don't know if we ever figured out why it happens. We just know it happens. So if you watch an N-Sane Trilogy run, you'll see like, you know, they'll do like a slide spin, they'll hop in the air, they'll touch the ground off of a hill, and then they'll just fly through the level. And so this is where the 60 FPS comes in, because on console, Hobbs sliding was notorious for being really hard to start up. Like you had to do it you have to do it off of a hill or an elevated platform, and even if you did get it, it wasn't a guarantee that it was going to work really well, or like if you were even going to start it. And on PC, and we're pretty sure this is because of the frame rate, it is just so much easier to get them started. You can get them started in more spots, and it's just because Crash falls faster. And it reached the point where even if the time difference theoretically between console and PC is probably not more than like, you know, like a minute to 2 minutes, it was just like the way the runs were approached are completely different because of that, to the point that like the majority of the N-Sane Trilogy player base runs on PC, but like PC and console runs don't even really look that similar anymore.
Yeah, imagine different spots to set up like that sort of movement within the run each.
Yeah, definitely.
So going from differences between a remake, how was the experience with the brand new Crash Bandicoot 4? It's About Time, which came out in 2020, I believe.
Yeah.
How was that as the fresh experience going in?
That was great. It had been so long since we even just had a new Crash game. And, you know, again, like I did with the N-Sane Trilogy, I got the demo for that and I just grinded it for days before the game came out. And it was just like the way the physics were, like I felt like movement in the game was really crisp. You had a lot of control. Even though like it doesn't feature any glitched movement like a lot of the older Crash games, the base movement in the game just feels so clean in how it flows that it was just fun to fly through the levels. And just learning how to go through like these new level designs that they made was just an awesome experience.
Was there any particular aspects that you really enjoyed, like differences from the original trilogy and Crash 4? And if there was anything that you didn't like or wish was slightly different, an example of that?
Casually or the speedrun?
Let's start with casual and then go into speedrunning.
Casually, I'm definitely really glad that they made changes that I felt were necessary. I think an issue that a lot of the PS2 era Crash games ran into is that if they weren't deviating incredibly off of the formula, they were oftentimes trying to stick too close to it. Like the crystals, for example, stopped being plot relevant after the third Crash game, and then from that point on it just felt like they kept shoehorning them into every single game afterwards because, well, it's Crash Bandicoot, we have to have crystals.
Have the purple.
Yeah, so in Crash 4 there are no crystals, and I think that was one of the best things they did because they had no plot relevance, and like you can still like Crash 1 shows, you can still have a get from point A to point B without having a collectible in the middle that you need to have. So that was definitely one of my favorite things. Like, as overall, they were willing to deviate from the formula as necessary. Another thing I really liked is that they got rid of the life system, or they made it optional, which they basically got rid of the life system.
Yeah.
Because something I noticed a lot of people were critical of with Crash 4 when it came out was that it was very reliant on trial and error. But trial and error has always been a big part of Crash. It was just less noticeable in the older games because they couldn't go as far with it as they could with Crash 4, because the life system was just like, well, if we make it too punishing for them, they're going to game over. They're going to have to start the level over. They're not going to have fun, and then they're going to stop. Whereas with Crash 4, when you remove the life system from that, because life system is kind of just really archaic. It stopped mattering after like the arcade era of video games. And it's just there to like introduce fake difficulty. And when you remove that, you can see how Crash 4 is notorious for being really hard, and is probably the hardest Crash game to just complete. But it's hard in a rewarding way where once you figure out what you're supposed to do to get through it, it's great. And I think the best comparison is like, if you compare it to like Super Meat Boy or Celeste, which are also trial and error platformers, but people love them because it's rewarding to get through. And that's just how I view Crash 4. And they were able to do that because they removed the life system. And then from a speedrun perspective, one thing I do really like, and this was another controversial change they made, is that you can't actually carry Aku Aku masks between levels in Crash 4. So even if you leave one level with 2 masks, you will enter the next one with 0. And I know some people didn't like this because some of the routing in the older Crash games was like, well, I want to carry 2 masks out of this level so I can either get an invincibility or do some damage abuses in the next level. And that was also, honestly, always a factor of Crash runs that I didn't like. And one of the things that makes me really like Crash 2 is that that's not really a factor in the speedrun just because of the way it plays out. So in Crash 4, I like that not only do I not have to worry about, well, I need to take 2 masks into this next level or I'm going to lose time, so I need to not get hit. So not only do you not have to worry about that, you can also be really liberal with your mask usage in each individual level, where I'm just like, okay, well, I have this one mask and there's this thing coming up and it might be faster for me to damage abuse through it. And that's fine because I'm not going to carry this mask into the next level anyway. So I guess that one's ultimately a matter of preference, but I personally like being able to more liberally use masks instead of having to save them to think like, 5 levels ahead. And that was actually one thing that really I didn't like about the remake of Crash 2 is that the way the 4th and 5th warp rooms are set up, it's optimal to go into the 4th boss fight in the remake of Crash 2 with 2 masks, burn one of them in the boss fight, and then conserve that second mask for the remainder of the run. And I'm just that turned me off of the run because I was just like, well, if I take a hit, I'm losing like 10 seconds at least. So
sort of a tangent, but is I guess I can't really specify a specific game, but the speed boost that you gain in the invincibility state, is that faster than the neutral slide spin, or is that quicker than the invincibility state?
So it varies per game. In Crash 2, the invincibility actually slows you down. We don't know why, but for some reason, when you're invincible in Crash 2, Crash's slide is extremely slow. It sends him nowhere. And because the neutral slide spin carries your slide speed through the spin, it's faster to just walk than it is to actually like slide. So for Crash 2, you actually actively avoid getting invincibility, except for in level 16 hanging out, and that's just because you use it to quickly go through the handrails. And that's the only point in the entire run where you want an invincibility. In Crash 3, it has the opposite effect, where for some reason in Crash 3, when you have an invincibility, your slide becomes really fast. So in Crash 3, the strategy is to get invincibility as much as you can to just fly through levels with neutral slide jump. And in the any % no item glitch run of Crash 3, I find that to be a nuisance because, okay, well, I took a hit, so I'm going to lose a few seconds in this level or the next level. But in 105%, it doesn't really matter that much because every time trial usually gives you 2 or 3 masks anyway. So if you take a stray hit somewhere in 105%, you just go into a time trial and get the masks back. And that's actually something I think is really cool about the original Crash 3's full completion run, is that the route is so flexible because of that some people only use 2 or 3 splits for a 2-hour run.
Damn.
Yeah. And then like in other games, masks are usually like pretty inconsequential. In the original Crash 1 and then like Crash 2 and Crash 3 in the N-Sane Trilogy, the speed boost you get isn't faster or noticeably faster than just, you know, slide spinning or just like, you know, zigzagging through the levels in Crash 1, which is the movement tech there. So usually you only get invincibility if it would just help you go through enemies or whatever. And then in the remake of Crash 1, it is ideal to get invincibilities because it does make Crash move faster.
So Crash 2, basically, it turns your slide into going through tar, and in Crash 3, it's like on ice.
Yeah, it's a pretty good analogy, actually.
And then masks obviously change completely going into Crash 4 with the variety of different power-ups.
Oh yeah, that's definitely something I really liked with Crash 4 as well. Was I feel like Crash 4 was really smart with how it handled its gimmicks compared to like previous Crash games that tried. I think the quantum masks were a better execution of what Crash 3 tried to do with the power-ups. Because, you know, Crash 3, I guess, for example, the most powerful power-up is the Death Tornado Spin, and it just completely trivializes platforming in the last 2 warp rooms. And it's just like, well, this just makes the game too easy. And then if you go into Crash 4 and you have a quantum mask that is basically the Death Tornado Spin, but you can only have him in specific parts of specific levels, you can design the levels around that power up, and it just adds to them instead of, you know, taking away from them, which I think is fantastic.
And there's really interesting, like, I've just played it through like from a casual perspective, and the different movements within those, like the spinning mask, for example, like doing the jumps and getting super like high jumps and being able to glide for a long period of time from a casual perspective. And I can't even imagine what you can do with speedrunning. An example that I saw during your one of your can't get the words out. During one of the later on, with the gravity mask, that's what I was thinking. I couldn't think gravity word for a sec. The gravity mask, and you just go through the ceiling and go outside the range of level. How is something?
Oh yeah.
So for a visual for people, the gravity mask does what it sounds like. It reverses gravity, so Crash goes up towards the ceiling, and there's certain spots in this speedrun that I've seen going through the entire ceiling and just going above. I believe it's in the Cortex, or in this example I'm thinking of, in the Cortex castle level. How is something like that discovered, I guess? Because it seems very precise setup.
So I'm not a strat finder. Usually other people in the community find it, and I'm just like, cool, I'm gonna do that. From what I've gathered, there are times where a huge skip like that is just found by complete accident. I think the best example of that for Crash 4 is I think on like day 3 we found a skip that cut down the time for the first boss fight with Engine to like a minute, and it was literally just complete accident. Someone was just playing and he landed on the rim of the drums, which you're not supposed to be able to do, and when he attacked Engine, instead of doing a spin, he did a slide spin, and it hit Engine twice, and for some reason that just skipped immediately to the next phase, and we were just like, oh my god, this fight is so fast. Like, stuff like that is an accident. But when you have these stuff where like the quantum masks in the speedrun just completely break the game in half. I think the only one that really doesn't have any wild strats to it is Lonnie Loli, which is the matter phasing mask, the first one you get.
Okay, yeah.
And that's just because there's not really a lot of application to being able to like phase crates in and stuff. There's some stuff in the all clear gems category that you can do that's kind of cool, but nothing as crazy as Akano, the Death Tornado Spin mask that you just fly through levels and like skip huge parts of it. The best example of that would be the level Off Balance. We just completely skipped at the end of the level, like 75% of the way in. Or the anti-gravity mask where, we use the anti-gravity, we dodge death triggers, and then we just like walk across the top of a level or just fly down to the bottom. Stuff like that, from what I've gathered. Usually someone has an idea and they poke around to see if there's like any chance that this idea works. And then like when they find something, they just slowly pick at it until like eventually just a skip happens. And that's just kind of my understanding of how it works, having never really, looked for a skip myself or like any strat of that sort. I think that's just the general process. Someone has an idea, they poke around, they find something, and they just repeat until it turns into a full skip.
So an example that I thought was interesting, so for people who've played like casual playthroughs through Crash 4, you do have the masks for a set period of time within that level. But a couple of examples I saw was where you either go above, I guess, a trigger which gets rid of the mask, so you're able to use the mask in a later area where you're not supposed to, where the game should have gotten rid of it for you, which leads to some interesting results, because obviously the game's not designed for you to have that mask there.
Yeah, there's multiple places where that happens. I think the one you were talking about on Cortex Island is in the level Nitro Processing. Very, very early in the level, they give you the anti-grav mask, and we found there's multiple ways that we found how to do this, but the one that is the modern way to do it is like the moment you get to the first side-scrolling section, you can use the anti-grav mask to just barely squeeze through the 2 death triggers of like the 2 moving cogs, and from there you can just cut out the entire side-scrolling section of the level, and or of that part of the level, and it lets you keep the anti-grav mask for the entire level, and you just use it to just fly through the rest of it. And then another example is the one I mentioned in the level Off Balance, where at like the second to last checkpoint, right before that, we use Akano to just fly over the death, or fly over the trigger that gets rid of them, and then from there we can just get on top of the ceiling of the last side scrolling section, and then just use that to fly to the end of the level, because you can see it in the background.
Yeah. I think if this is the right one I'm visualizing, people, you're basically seeing just part of the level and all the stuff's going on behind the background you're seeing because you've flown over the entire level.
Yeah.
I'd say a point I'd actually completely forgotten or slipped my mind was, how is the experience with the separate characters? It's obviously gone into all Crash's different aspects, but how's the experience playing through with the other characters in Crash 4?
So overall, with Dingodile, I think he's the most fun of the separate characters, and I think that's the general consensus of most people I've spoken to. I think I've only spoken to one person who disliked Dingodile, and I think that what makes Dingodile so fun is that he kind of feels like a Crash 1-esque like Crash, where he's got running, he's got his spin, and that's about it. But he also has like his air gun lets him hover, which is really cool because it lets you do a lot of really neat platforming and just abusing crates and such. And then he's got his vacuum to like just suck in and like shoot explosives at people. So Dingodile is like just really fun to play as. Cortex is the character that is, from what I've observed, the most widely hated to play as, both in a speedrunning casual perspective, and I think it's just because he's so wildly different from the other characters. He requires a lot more precision, which is really rough when you're in like a 3D area, just because Cortex doesn't have an auto aim like he does in like Twinsanity. So you have to be really precise with how you're aiming, and then he doesn't even really have a way to kill enemies. He just turns them into obstacles to use. So I can understand the frustration towards Cortex, especially casually. In the speedrun, I've actually grown to find Cortex pretty fun to play as, just because he is technically the fastest of the 4 characters, because he has his like little air dash that he does, and that just lets him fly through things. So I find it fun to like become good with playing as Cortex, but he's definitely like one of the more frustrating characters to play. Tana, I've slowly grown to find her to be the least fun character to play, just because not only is her moveset really basic, everything she does slows her down. So unless you're just constantly running and single jumping, anything you do with Tana is gonna slow you to a crawl. If you attack with her, she stops moving. If you double jump with her, there's like a slight delay. Her grapple hooks like locks her in place. It just makes levels with her really dull, I feel. And then like I feel like her grappling hook has the same lack of precision that Cortex as a concept has. So in the speedrun, Tana just becomes pretty dreadful to run through, and I feel like, especially for like the all clear gems runners, which is like the go-to quote unquote completion category in Crash 4, because 106 is crazy in that game. But a lot of the ACG players, which is what we call the category, like whenever I talk to them, we all have the conclusion of Tana sucks. So it's funny, like when I listen to like casual people talk about how terrible Cortex is, and then like a lot of runners will also be like, oh yeah, Cortex is terrible. But then, like, someone's a seasoned runner when they're just like, Tana is also terrible, and I'm just like, yeah.
It's just like, oh, we know you're the you know your stuff.
Yeah, and I guess one thing I will point out that I am fairly critical of with Crash 4 is the way they handled 100, like the full completion, is definitely really repetitive. There's a lot of what I perceive to be padding in the game. Like the inverted levels were completely unnecessary. I would go as far as to say that the insanely perfect relics were unnecessary because they already gave you a gem for dying less than 4 times in a level. So a 106% playthrough, you're like at minimum gonna go through every level 3 times for for like the first pass, the inverted pass, the relic pass. It's you have to really love Crash 4 to be willing to do that. And like I'm one of the people who really loves Crash 4 to be willing to do that, but I also understand why so many people are not willing to do that.
So I think a lot of people will have a good idea in terms of the original trilogy of full completion of what is required. Could you briefly go through why that's, I guess, like you say, padded out in the full completion?
Yeah, so I guess for comparison, you know, Crash 1 and Crash 2. Well, Crash 1 doesn't even have crystals, but Crash 2, as far as full completion goes, for Crash 1 and Crash 2, you just need to get every gem. And then, you know, just beat the game from there. And that's 100%. And you can do that with minimal revisits. Crash 3 kind of pads it out with the relics, which means for all of the main 25 levels, you're going to have to do them at least twice. Which, like, on paper, that sounds bad. But thankfully, the time trials and the way you approach those compared to just approaching them for, like, the crystal and gem path is different enough that it doesn't feel too repetitive, even though you are doing every level more than once. So even though it is a longer run, it really doesn't feel as bad. Crash 4, the real big issue is just that, for one, the levels in Crash 4 are way longer than they are in the PS1 games, and that's just because they had the capability to do that, being on, you know, PS4 and such. But also, like, the biggest offender of the padding is definitely the inverted levels, which are literally just, they're the exact same level, but they're mirrored, and they have some weird, you know, color filter or whatever that they thought would be cool, but most of them end up being an eyesore. And then like the hidden gems are in different locations that are usually like more ridiculous. Like I hear a lot of people complain about the placement of like boxes and gems in Crash 4. With boxes, I feel like while most of them, I think with reasonable like ability to deduce how the patterns of how they hide things and actually just like poking around your surroundings, you can find most of the hidden boxes pretty reasonably, and the issue is just how abundant they are, and that just gets tiring. And the hidden gems are in the normal levels, I kind of view in the same way, where like if you're clever enough to deduce how they would hide something, you could probably find it. And the inverted levels just take that and throw it out the window. They just hide the hidden gems in places where they're either so blatantly obvious that there's no way you can miss them, or they're so horrendously hidden that I don't know how you would ever find those without a guide. And so like that's one issue. So you're basically, the inverted levels are going through the exact same levels a second time, and it's just mirrored, and then there's a weird filter that makes it harder to see things, and then you have to like just get lucky with finding the hidden gems if you don't just know where they are. And because the all clear gems category is already like a 2.5 to 3 hour category, so in a 106% speedrun, if you're doing everything twice, that's already like 5 hours right there. And then from there, you have to factor in that you also have to do the time trials, which are really brutal in Crash 4 just because of the sheer length of the levels. And then you also have to factor in the flashback tapes, which are like the really hard, you know, like the 2D levels where you break every crate on like try not to die kind of thing. And ideally that takes maybe about 30 minutes, but realistically it's probably going to take you longer because you're going to make mistakes. And it just all adds up to being a really long category where you're kind of just doing a lot of the same thing over and over and over. And there's definitely like an appeal to like the endurance test of it, but it definitely is, it goes against the whole, like, you know, oftentimes the best way to play a Crash game is to 100% it. In Crash 4, I definitely don't think that's the case. I definitely don't think that makes the game bad. Crash 4 is my second favorite Crash game, but I definitely understand why 106% completion turns people off. But the biggest strength of Crash 4 is that I think it's completely, really fun to play just going through it and just beating every level, which is not something I can really say about any Crash game outside of like Crash 1 and Crash Twinsanity.
There is a really good video I enjoyed. I've not actually checked out his channel for a while, but a YouTuber called Kadikarus made a very good video on Crash 4. It's a basically overall video on Crash 4, but there is a good half of the video about the full completion aspect, which he does with really good comedic editing and playthrough. And just watch the video. Go search it up. It's a really good video.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Kadikarus. I've seen that video. He definitely is not exaggerating with the way that 106% can be in that game. I do think he exaggerated a little bit where he said that if you're just going through the game and just beating all the levels, you have like maybe like 2 to 3 hours of gameplay. It took me still like 12 hours to get through the game on first playthrough. Granted, I was like trying to get all the boxes, but I wouldn't like go back and try try again if I missed any.
There is an absolute ton of boxes in these levels now. There's like from just like 54 in like some of the older games to like 200 and something.
The smallest crate count in Crash 4 is the second level, I think, has 96 or like 92, and that's the only level with less than 100 boxes. And then the highest crate count is like 503.
So you just missed one.
So, yeah,
just
that.
yeah.
I think the best way I would describe Crash 4 is that it accentuates every aspect of the Crash's formula in general, and like just maxes it out to 11. And the positive of that is that all of the things that make Crash great are fantastic in Crash 4. The level design is great, the movement is great, the physics are great, the platforming is fun, the humor is like some of the best in the series. It's all wonderful. But on the flip side, the things about the Crash formula that are not so great also get amplified to 11. So, hidden crates are not a new feature to Crash. That's been a thing since, Crash 1 and Crash 2. But, in Crash 1 and Crash 2, it's like, like 1 or 2 hidden crates in like every 3 or 4 levels. It's like, okay, whatever. If there's like a billion hidden crates in every level, I can see how that gets draining. And then, they add all this extra stuff to give you more stuff to do for 106% completion. And, in Crash 3, when it goes as far as, getting the extra gems, getting the time trial stuff, that's fine. But when you're like going through every level 3 times and you can't die and you can't miss anything and you have to find this hidden gem, you have to get a certain number of Wumpa Fruit, I can see how that gets tiring. So like Crash 4 is definitely a very extreme game of extreme highs and extreme lows. And which side outweighs the other is really just going to depend on the person. I know a lot of people where the extreme lows kind of ruin the extreme highs for them. For me, it was the opposite experience. I was like, yeah, there's parts of this game I don't like, but the parts of it that I do like are so great that it just more than makes up for it.
Like I said, that is for the full completion, which is definitely for the trophy hunters or the passion project. So
a weird mentality I see only in the Crash like fandom is that if the 100% completion isn't good, then the game isn't good for some people. And I just that baffles me. Like, I love Crash and I love 100%ing almost all of them. But out of every video game I've ever played in the nearly 30 years I've been alive, I can probably say I've 100%ed maybe 5% of those games. Like, my favorite game of all time is Kingdom Hearts 1. I have never 100% in that because I don't want to. And it's just like, it's just weird. And I think it's because Crash is so well known for the original trilogy having amazing 100% completion that people just tie that to a requirement for a Crash game. It's like, it has to have fantastic 100% or it's not worth it. And I'm just like, this game is so well designed from a level like structure perspective that just going through it is fantastic. And from that point, if you want to go for the rest of it, then you can. But if you don't want to go for the rest of it, I hope you still enjoyed what you did. And like, to me, that still makes it a really good game.
Yeah, I guess it's a weird way to put it, because I played through Crash 4 once I discovered the scale of 100% completion is. I was like, no, but that didn't like reduce the enjoyment I had of playing through it the first time or just playing through it casually.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, definitely not.
And I'm guessing those people made sure to fully complete stuff like Crash Bash and go through.
Yeah, Crash Bash, I already have like a very low opinion of that game compared to other people, but 200% completion in that game is just ridiculous. I don't know how anybody like actually just does that. And then like even like my favorite Crash game is Crash Twinsanity. And the first time I ever 100% of that game was in a speedrun race with a bunch of people. I had never 100%ed it casually. And the first time I actually casually 100%ed it was last year, which I did as a sub goal. I was just like, yeah, I've never 100%ed this game in a non-speedrun setting. Let's do it. So like, you can definitely enjoy Crash games without having to 100% them.
Is Crash, Crash Twinsanity is a weird one, because I played it when I was young and I really enjoyed it, and I don't think a lot of people played it, but I feel I've read that it got negative reviews or not many people liked it. Is that just me reading bad articles, or
Crash, the story with Crash Twinsanity is really complicated. The best way I could, like TLDR it is it had a really troubled development. There's a misconception that it was rushed, and that's not entirely accurate. The game had a 3-year development cycle. They were working on it from the time that Wrath of Cortex released to the time that Twinsanity released. But there was just like a combination of multiple factors. The dev team that they had for it just really wasn't too experienced, and they were overly ambitious with what they were trying to do. They were trying to completely revitalize Crash and take it in like a completely new direction that would give it a completely fresh coat of paint. It was like really ambitious. So they were a bit in over their head. And I think in the last year of development, they had to completely reset everything because the plot that they had in mind was just too similar to Ratchet and Clank. So what they originally planned, and like a lot of the concept art that you see in, you know, Twinsanity and that has been released on the internet, just was never going to make it to the final product. And by the end of it, they were just struggling to just get something cohesive together. So that's why the end result with Twinsanity is a really short game that does feel all over the place, but I think what's there is fantastic. It's really just some of the most fun I've had playing Crash, despite its short length. And I know that there's a lot of people who praise Twinsanity for what it could have been. They're just like, oh, well, if all this stuff had gone correctly, if they had been able to put in what they wanted to, it would be the perfect Crash game. And that's why it's my favorite. And for me, that's a weird take for me. Crash Twinsanity is my favorite because of what is actually on the disc. Like I love the level design. I love the platforming. It is by far the funniest Crash game, the most memorable in terms of dialogue. I could probably recite 90% of that game's script just because it's that funny.
It's good.
Its soundtrack is so, like, I've never heard a soundtrack like that in any other game. It's just like completely a cappella, and it just works for that game's tone. It's just fantastic. As far as like reception to the game went, critics were definitely they're very hard on it. I don't think a lot of people said it was like a terrible game, but it definitely got very mixed reviews along the similar line of like what Wrath of Cortex got. As far as the fan base goes, I feel like Twinsanity is the single most divisive game in the franchise. You will have people like me who adore the game and will defend it till the day they die. And then I have also met people who think Twinsanity is one of the worst things that has ever happened and it deserves to die in a fire and nobody should ever acknowledge it. Like there was one time, there was a guy in my stream who, like, while I was playing Twinsanity, was like pointing out all these little minor flaws, explaining how Twinsanity was like the worst thing ever and how it ruined the Crash franchise. And I was like, bro, shut up.
ruined it. It is never recovering.
I was like, you're just looking for reasons to complain about this game now. Like one of the things he said was like, I can't believe this game's unskippable cutscenes resulted in Crash of the Titans having unskippable cutscenes. And I'm just like, what? Yeah, like that's some reach. I'm like, okay. But yeah, Twinsanity is like there's very little like common ground when it comes to like people's opinion on that game. Like again, it's my favorite Crash game. I don't expect it to be everybody else's favorite Crash game. I would also never be so foolish to say that it is the best Crash game, because for one, saying anything is the best game of anything is like trying to inject fact into something that's a matter of opinion. Yeah, but again, like I could not like realistically look at Crash Twinsanity and say this is objectively a 10 out of 10 game, because it definitely shows the signs of how troubled its development was. But at the end of the day, what we did get has no business being as good as it is. So
what's your thoughts on Wrath of Cortex? Because an aspect I don't know if I enjoyed it as much as the other games, but I did enjoy the fact that how much variety there was in terms of what they tried out in that game.
Wrath of Cortex is an interesting one for me. I definitely remember an age where Wrath of Cortex was a very disliked Crash game, and that was, you know, right after Crash 3 and everything had happened. So Wrath of Cortex was like the most recent game, and it definitely felt like a step down. But, you know, on retrospective, it's one of those Crash games that's been vindicated by history. It's got a lot of fans now. The way I feel about Wrath of Cortex is that I don't have an issue with variety. A common criticism I hear with Crash 3 is that there's too many vehicles, because about 50% of Crash 3 is vehicles. And that used to be something I was critical of, but going back and playing more Crash 3 when I did start to appreciate the speedrun, that didn't really bother me so much. The issue with me for Wrath of Cortex isn't so much the variety, but the way it was executed. I feel like a lot of the vehicles are very annoying to control or have some property that makes them very frustrating. And then that on top of the fact that they do take up a gigantic portion of the game. I think there's only 6 levels total where you play as Crash, and you only play as Crash. Like there's no vehicle at no point. Like every other level is like partial vehicle, full vehicle, or you're playing as Coco, who like Coco's my favorite character in the franchise. I love that character to death, but she is an awful character in Wrath of Cortex. She's just a worse Crash.
Oh god, I just remembered that,
So, like,
that homing bug flying thing. You know, when you got to like lock on like an RPG or something like that from a like COD game.
oh yeah, level 9, that sinking feeling. That is a rough level for sure. That is one level. There was one time where I was watching Jay Hobbs, and you know he does shows for GDQ, and he was doing the first step, and he was doing Wrath of Cortex that week. So it was just like going in and trying to speedrun the game with minimal knowledge to show that it's not hard to get into speedrunning. And you know, ideally he wants no coaching when he's doing that because he wants to figure it out for himself. And he went into that level, and I was like, okay, I'm not gonna say anything, but if you decide that you need help figuring out how to do this level, just tell me, because I would not be surprised. But he figured it out. So yeah, so I think ultimately with Wrath of Cortex, it's kind of, again, like it similar to how like Crash 4 accentuates every aspect about the series as a whole. I feel like Wrath of Cortex accentuates everything about Crash 3. So like Crash 3, when you actually have like good platforming, it's fantastic. And I feel like Wrath of Cortex is the same way. There's some really good levels in that game, but also it accentuates all the worst aspects of Crash 3, which is just like too many vehicles that I don't think were executed the best. So it generally, I consider Wrath of Cortex overall is a good Crash game, but it's definitely not one of my favorites. And I also definitely think it's best experienced on Xbox because the loads are way shorter.
Just I guess to round up the variety or the spin-offs of Crash, thoughts of the speedrunning, because you've pretty much done it all. So speedrunning the racing games and also the Game Boy Advance games.
So I have very minimal experience with the racing games. I've dabbled a little bit into both like the original CTR and like CTR Nitro Fueled. They're definitely really cool runs, and I wish I could play more of them, but they're so physically hard on my hands just because it's constant movement on the D-pad. It's just I can go through maybe like a single run of either of them before my hands are just done. But they're really definitely fantastic. I wish I had a better scope of opinion on like how great they are. As far as the GBA games go, the first one, The Huge Adventure, or in like Europe and Australia, I think it was called Crash Bandicoot XS. I do not have a high opinion of that game. I actually played it again a few weeks ago, and my opinion of it did not change. It's like a solid attempt at putting Crash onto a portable system, but it definitely really suffers from having really poor level design. There's a lot of situations of like leaps of faith or enemies that are like too grouped together that you can't possibly see and prepare for. It's just a really obnoxious game to go through. And then in a speedrun setting, on top of all of that, there's not really anything that makes the movement interesting. It's really just slide spinning. So like other Crash games where the movement is really basic usually have the benefit of like, well, the level design is interesting enough where it makes up for it, and it's just still just fun to go through. I think Crash 4 and the remake of Crash 1 are fantastic examples of that. But The Huge Adventure is just like, well, the level design is frustrating, so it just becomes a frustrating game. And then in the second GBA game, N-Trance, I think is actually the most underrated Crash game. They significantly improved the level design to make it far less like obnoxious or unfair. And the power-ups they added were great, at least from a speedrun setting. The first power-up you get is the super slide, where if you just hold the L button, you just fly forward with the slide, and that defines the entire remainder of the run, and it's just so fantastic to watch.
That sent me into so many Nitro boxes when I played through.
Yeah. It becomes a situation where like you do have to memorize every level. But it's such a cool run to watch when it's done well.
Entrance had some super cool like the ball levels. I really enjoyed those. Those. They were really good.
Yeah, the ball levels. I doubling back to the Wrath of Cortex, the ball levels I think were the one vehicle that they did really well. That's definitely the best addition that Wrath of Cortex brought to the series. And I think the only out of the 4 ball levels in that game, the only one I dislike is not because it's a ball level, but just because the design is like just aggravating, and that's level 14 Eskimo roll. But the other 3 are just great. And I think they translated it pretty well into N-Trance. It was one of those things where like I had to get a feel for it, but once you get it down, you realize that it's pretty well done.
We just mentioned, or mentioned a moment ago about long runs. It'll probably be a short explanation, but could you explain what the category Crash 511% is and how that came about, or the?
Okay. So first off, there's like the board for multiple Crash and Spyro games, and that's born from there's the yearly Sprashfecta where you know, a bunch of people get together and they fully complete not only all three of the Crash games on PS1, but also all three of the Spyro games. But like one segment of that is the 305%, which is, you know, Crash 1, Crash 2, Crash 3, full completion all in one sitting. At some point in 2018, the friend group I'm in, we started doing like weekly or monthly like Wrath of Cortex races. And at one point this just evolved into, why don't we do a 411% race, which would just be the three PS1 games plus Wrath of Cortex. And I think that happened like once. And then one day, this was after I had learned Twinsanity, because Twinsanity was a speedrun that I had wanted to learn for so long but put off because of its difficulty. But when I finally did, one day I was just like, okay, well, I know all of the PS1 games. I know the Wrath of Cortex, and I know Twinsanity. And chronologically on the original timeline, these are the first 5 games in the series, like in the main series. So why don't I just put it all together and do a 511% run? And it was kind of like one of those things where like I bounced the idea around in my head and I was like, maybe I'll get to it eventually. And then I caught wind that one day another Crash streamer, Rex, or Rexay is his Twitch username, but he had for a while been doing like weekly 305s or like daily, like weekly 411%. And he was like looking to like pick up the basics of Twinsanity so he could do a 511. And I was like, oh god, I got to do it before him. I got to be the first person to do it. So that's just how it came to be. It was just like, I know all 5 of these Crash games. I'm like possibly like one of the only people on the planet who knows all 5 of them and is competent in all 5 of them. Well, competent in quotations. I wasn't that good at Wrath of Cortex, and still I'm like average at that game. But the other 4 I felt like I was pretty solid at. So it was just one of those, I want to do all 5 of these in one sitting.
And just for reference, I believe at least the most recent time was 11 hours in total doing all 5 games back to back.
Yeah, Rex has a faster time than that because he's better than me at the first 4 games. And his time is like a 10-hour 40 something. It's a run I would be willing to go back to at some point, but I would have to sit down and actually grind out Wrath of Cortex, because I would want to at least be to the point in Wrath of Cortex that I am in like the other games before I tried it again.
A point that I should have mentioned we were going on about it because it just came to mind. It talks about with the racing games about like hand issues with how intense it is. I thought when watching the Crash 4 runs, because it's so prolonged slide spins, have you ever had any sort of hand issues with that? Because it seems like the same movement again and again, it's like RSI or anything like that.
Nothing too bad with Crash 4. There are some times, especially if I'm doing like all clear gems, again, because it's, you know, it's a 2.5 to 3 hour run. There are times doing that where I can get a little worn out. But nothing to the degree that I get doing CTR, even Crash 2. Crash 2, I've actually reached the point with like physical stress with that game, with like just how fast the RPM of inputs is and how stressful it is on my hands, where I can't really play Crash 2 for more than like an hour and a half to 2 hours before I need to like tap out. And it's reached the point where I've only mentioned this on my stream and like offhand to other people, but I'm kind of past the point where I feel like I can realistically grind Crash 2. It's the speedrun I've done the longest. I've run it for 7 years now, and like I've achieved so many goals that I had or didn't have in that game, and now like any further I want to go isn't really so much a goal so much as like a logical next step of, well, this would be the next milestone if I wanted to. So I've kind of hit the point where I'm probably gonna keep Crash 2 to just like marathons or like like multi-game races, and just not really try to go for another PB again, just because I physically can't. The reason what sets Crash 2 and CTR apart from Crash 4 is that those games, like all the PS1 games, are actually optimal on D-pad, even though Crash 2 and 3 have analog as an option. The way the coordinates and movement are coded in the game is that it's faster to move on diagonals, so like diagonal up, diagonal left, diagonal down, etc. That is faster than moving in like the 360 directions on analog. And that's also why zigzagging, where you alternate diagonals to go faster, that's why it's a thing in the PS1 game. So it ends up being faster, just use D-pad overall. So when you're going as fast as you are in Crash 2 and you're just like constantly moving your thumb on the D-pad, it's just really, really draining. It doesn't affect me as much in Crash 3 just because there are so many breaks in the run because of the vehicles, and the movement also just isn't as fast as it is in Crash 2. And then Crash 1, it kind of hits me after a while, just because Crash 1 is also a lot of like constant zigzag on the D-pad, but the total rate of movement in Crash 1 to me isn't as rapid as it is in Crash 2. So while Crash 1 does wear me out eventually, it's not to the same degree. But like Crash 4 and like all of the N-Sane Trilogy, it's optimal on the analog stick, so that doesn't really hurt my hands as much as, you know, any of the PS1 games or CTR.
We had a bit of a joke about the Crash Bash completion, but you have actually done speedruns of the game. I saw one with, I believe, a co-op with White Paws, I believe.
Yep.
And it looked like a chaotic, fun speedrun to do casually, I guess, or a casual speedrun quotations. I don't know about going for world records. How was was that be a good way to describe it, or?
Yeah, so I've on and off done Crash Bash for a few years, despite vocally not liking the game at all and thinking it's bad. There's some weird masochistic allure to just speedrunning that game and just getting completely trolled by it. I can only enjoy it in small doses, and I don't even remember the last time I completed a single player run because it just gets really frustrating. The co-op runs I did with White Paws were they're really fun, and having the adventure mode be a 2v2 situation as opposed to a 1v3 situation definitely makes it way more manageable.
I probably should have explained for listeners, Crash Bash, because people might not even be aware of it, is basically like a Crash Mario Party, sort of. It has like a lot of mini games. It's not like a traditional Crash game.
Yeah.
And there's some weird ones. I quotation enjoyed it when I was younger. I don't know if I'd have the same experience if I played it now.
Yeah, it was one of those games where I had very fond memories of it, and then I replayed it and was like, "Wow, that was all nostalgia." The most notorious thing about Crash Bash is that its AI blatantly cheats. It is an unfair video game in like every sense of the term. It is completely unfair. But there's this weird allure to running it. Like I could not constantly run that game like some people do, but I think it speaks volumes that Crash Bash is one of the most active Crash games at the moment as a speedrun. There's just some weird draw to like running it.
But the masochists have just like appeared out from under the thing, just like, this is the game for us.
I think it also got a boost because the Rixer did a video on Crash Bash, and I think that drew some people to it because he has that effect on anything he makes a video of. So
what's the example of a way the AI cheats?
I think the best example I can give is the final boss with Oxide is actually a strat to death abuse at the start of it, because the AI gets easier when you like the more you die. And if you try to fight Oxide, and he's like one of the pinball mini games, if you try to fight him without death abusing, it is literally impossible to get a goal on him. He will not let you score. And then, you know, you die three times, you know, he starts to let up a little bit, and then you can maybe beat him. If you die like 5 or 6 times, Oxide just forgets what common sense is, and he just starts letting everything in. And that's just kind of like the MO of like a lot of the like crystal and gem, and especially like relic challenges in Crash Bash, is that basically the AI is going to brutalize you and not let you do anything, and they're going to anticipate your every single move until one time they just suddenly decide not to.
Sounds amazing. Let's leave a speed.
It's like I think the comparison of like Crash 4 is difficult in a way that feels rewarding. You know, when you beat a level in Crash 4, when you get everything in Crash 4, you're like, yeah, I did that. I figured it out. When I get something done in Crash Bash, I'm like, wow, I got lucky. Basically the best way I can describe it.
I think I'll take not a step back, I guess, but looking less on the games themselves, but on approaching them as a speedrun. So when Crash 4 came out, how did you approach that as a speedrunner in learning the route and improving times?
In the case of Crash 4, fortunately, the route was kind of just handed to us because it follows the Crash 1 like linear structure of go to this level, then this level mission. But as far as like learning how the run basically goes with something new like Crash 4, I basically went into it, you know, I did my casual playthrough of the game, and then when I started doing runs, you know, I just did them. Just did a playthrough, went through everything, kind of just go through it over and over to get a feel for the run. And then like when I'm really deep into it and I'm like, okay, I'm struggling with this part of the run, I'll just go back and practice that one part for a little bit. And that's kind of just how I approach every game, is like if it's an older game that already has a developed speed run, I'll like watch top runs to get a basic idea of how it goes. I'll maybe try and find a GDQ run because those are usually commentated. And then from there, I think the first step is really just going through the game and getting an understanding of it. If there's a trick that's really hard, you don't necessarily have to do it starting out. This is something I learned with Twinsanity. Twinsanity 100% is my favorite speedrun because of how broken and how crazy it is and how many cool tricks there are. But it is also a notoriously difficult speedrun. Like in the first level, there's a skip that just completely skips the first boss fight, but if you mess it up, you soft lock and you start over. And for years, I just refused to try and learn the rest of the run because I couldn't get that skip down. And then I just eventually just said, okay, if I want to learn this game, I'm just gonna have to come back to this later. And that was just like my MO from that point on with any game I learned. Is like, if something is giving me trouble, I'm just not gonna do it right. And just come back to it later. And that's kind of just what I've done, is just go through the game, see what you struggle with. If there's something that is giving you a lot of trouble, practice it out a little bit, see if you can figure it out. If you really can't figure it out at the time, just leave it for later. There's no rule that says that you have to do this trick. And then like eventually you'll be able to piece it together. And it's kind of just like, that's just the approach I've slowly developed over time. And it's even reflected in things that aren't necessarily speedruns. Like recently I've gotten into doing a randomizer in Kingdom Hearts 2. And there are 2 skips in like the randomizer run there's like the Cavern of Remembrance skip and there's the Shan Yu skip, which just let you get through things way earlier than you're supposed to. And for the longest time, I just didn't do them because when I tried learning them, it was like a real struggle. I was like, I can't figure these out. So I was like, okay, you know what? I'm just not going to worry about it right now. I'm just going to learn the other aspects of the randomizer. And then one time, like a week ago, I was just going through it and I was like, you know what? Let me try these again. And I got them both. Like it just comes with time. When you get a better understanding of the game, you kind of just piece together the things that you were struggling with before. And like I think like you have to strike a good balance between doing runs and getting the experience of just being in the setting of being in a speed run. The timer is running and you have to like play on the clock. There's a balance of like knowing how to do that and knowing when to grind things out, like just to practice something you're struggling with. Because I've definitely seen both extremes. I have seen people who do nothing but do runs and runs and runs and they never practice anything. And they're just like, why are all these people so much faster than me? And I'm just like, well, you're just doing runs and you're not stopping to think about what you're struggling with and grinding that out. And the reason these other people are pulling ahead of you is because when they do have something they struggle with, they'll sit there and they'll practice it until they get it down. But on the flip side, I have also seen people who do nothing but practice, where they will just practice constantly. And they will practice until they have this strat down to a T. And then when they're in a speedrun setting, they just cave because they're going against the clock now and they don't know how to handle that pressure. So it does, and then they're just like, why am I messing this up? I know this trick. I get it all the time in practice. And I'm just like, well, you don't know how to do it in a speedrun because the pressure is different when there's a clock going against you. And I think it's really important to get a mix of both. Like it's important to finish runs. To any beginning runner for any game, I would say the first thing you should focus on is finishing runs. And that is something I had to learn starting out, where I would reset over the tiniest things. And I had like a 1 hour and like 45-minute time in Crash 2. And then at one point it just clicks to just finish runs. Even if it doesn't PB, just finish the run. And you get that experience of knowing what you're supposed to do in that situation when the pressure's on you. But then at the same time, like you also need to know how to practice things. You know, with Crash 2, recently I've had a lot of trouble with the 5th warp room. So at one point I just sat down and was like, okay, I need to practice the 5th warp room because I keep killing runs here. And it's something you've got to do. And I think the moment I hit this mindset was really just learning Twinsanity, because Twinsanity was the first speed game I ran where it kind of demanded that mindset, just because the nature of the run, you can't really finish runs unless you know how to like do things like practice and be in the situation of being under pressure. So like I took one of my times down in one of the categories in Twinsanity from like a 35-minute run to just last night I got a 29-21, which is tied second place. And that really was just a matter of doing a couple runs, seeing what I was doing wrong, and going back and practicing those things. And it just all fell into place yesterday. And I think that's the most important thing, is just finding that balance.
Yeah, I would definitely agree. I predominantly do damageless or hitless runs of games, and it's very easy to get into a habit of having a wall, so to speak, in a run. Normally like around the middle, or like somewhere where there's a boss that has a particularly difficult strat, or has a lower consistency than the rest. and you can just continuously doing runs and resetting, and eventually you get that run that does make it go the distance to go past that. But then if you've not practiced that, or even if you've practiced the later stages of the bosses, it has that difference of you now have the pressure of knowing you finally got past that wall, and now you've got the added pressure of, I don't want to do that all again. So
yeah,
doing full runs even in that state, even on a low PV, is very handy for just learning to deal with that pressure, or so that you find when you're actually on the run.
Yeah, definitely.
But of course, every run's the run until it's not. So
yeah, I think another thing is to never be too attached to a run, no matter how good it feels like it's going. And that's something I carried over from. I've also done competitive Smash for several years now, and I remember there was a tweet from a player in my region, Seagull Joe, and the tweet was basically the way he maintains composure in tournament is that he goes into every set and he thinks to himself, I can win this set, but I can also lose it. So he never goes in thinking like, oh, well, there's no way I'm gonna win this, or there's no way I should lose this. I'm so much better than this person. And I think that's a very important mindset to have that I've carried over into speedrunning, is that go into every run thinking but like you can finish this, you can PB, but also accept that there is a chance that it will die. And I've had, especially again, going back to Twinsanity, the category I've been doing is called any percent no dimension skip, which is basically the old any percent before we found a trick that like cut half of the run out. And there's a trick at the very end, right before the final level, called warp skip, and it takes you from the beginning of the final hub all the way to the last level in the game. So it skips out 2 levels entirely. But the caveat of it is that to do it, you have to attach yourself to Cortex, and he stays attached to you even if you don't physically have him with you. So when you die, the game tries to respawn you with Cortex, and in the last level, it won't let you do that because you're not supposed to have him there, so the game will crash. So the caveat of this skip is that if you die at any point in the last level, the run's over because the game crashes. And the final level, Antagony, is an 8 to 9 minute level.
It's a very long one. Yeah.
So I have gone into runs, like when my PB was still 35, I've gone into runs where I was 5 minutes ahead of my PB, and I've been like, this is a really good pace, but it doesn't matter. It could die at any point, and then like I get like 2 minutes into the level and I die. And you know, if I was in the mindset of like, okay, this is it, this is the run, it has to be it, I probably would have been really pissed off. Like I would have been like screaming, like maybe trying to not throw my controller. But because I have that mindset of this could be the PB, but it could also just be another run that dies. Even though I'm 5.5 minutes ahead, I die. I'm just like, oh, that's unfortunate, and then just start another run. And I think it's important to maintain that clarity that no matter how good or how bad the run seems, anything can happen.
Just mention of the Smash has just reminded me, and thinking about events based that you participated in, I believe recently in a Smash tournament, and have previously commentated over crash runs for GDQ, Games Done Quick, the charity fundraising. Do you enjoy both racing and commentating at these events?
Definitely. The first in-person event I ever actually did a speedrun one was for last weekend. GSA held a speedrunning exhibition at Glitch Infinite, and that was my first experience being on a stage doing a run. It was at like 2 a.m, so there was like nobody in the audience, but it was still like a really cool experience to finally be able to do that, because I've submitted to GDQ several times and have yet to get in. Which again, it's a grueling process. I'm not really bummed about it, but at the same time, I personally believe, and I've been told by many people, that my commentary when it comes to crash runs is very solid, because I'm very good at explaining things and showing how knowledgeable I am of, you know, games in general. And that is also extended to beyond crash. Like I did a commentary for a Kingdom Hearts 1 run that a friend of mine, Crispy Tacos, did for a marathon. And I've never speedrun Kingdom Hearts 1, but again, it's my favorite game of all time. I'm borderline obsessed with it, and I've watched so many runs of it that I still had a basic grasp of being able to explain it. So I think as far as commentary goes, I definitely enjoy that as much as I enjoy actually doing the runs. The GDQ run where I did commentate for the remake of Crash 2, unfortunately was probably my worst performance as a commentator, and I did get a lot of criticism for talking over a lot of people and unintentionally stealing the show. But outside of that one gaffe, which was unfortunately on the GDQ stage, I feel like I've had some pretty solid commentary, and I definitely enjoy it a lot. Whenever like there's a crash run that gets into a marathon, if I'm good friends with the runner, I'll offer like, hey, if you want me to commentate, I'll gotcha.
What's the experience of being at such an event for people who may not? Obviously, a lot of people are aware of GDQ and watch the event, but what's the experience of being there on the couch at the time?
It's a completely new experience. Just having that, having that spotlight on you, like knowing that there's so many people watching you. It's exhilarating. It's a little bit scary, but like once you get into the groove of it, it's really fun. Like I've only been on the couch for a couple runs, and then again, I've never ran myself at a GDQ, but just it's definitely I don't even know how to describe it. It's just an exhilarating experience overall.
It must also be slightly strange considering a lot of runs of nowadays is through streaming, which is normally like behind computers through video cams, and it's like an actual people-based event. I don't know if that's a good way to describe it, or there's like actually people around while stuff's happening, while the runs happen.
Yeah, it's definitely really interesting for sure.
Another, I wouldn't say event-based, but falls in similar lines which was how I actually discovered you, was the IGN React series. Which
that's how a lot of people found me recently.
Which people who may not be aware, IGN do a video series where game developers react to speedruns of their games. So in Riko's case, the developers of Crash 4 reacted to his demo speedrun and the full, or at least different levels of Crash 4 being speedrun, which
they post release they did basically snippets of my run, which at the time was the record. The record now is like 13 minutes faster, but that's how speedruns develop.
But those two videos, it was just really good videos. The developers were super on board from the sounds of it, and quite hilarious while I was watching.
The funny thing is, I feel like a lot of people for some reason got the impression that the developers were really angry about how much I was skipping, because like there was one guy in the back who's like, no, you're not supposed to do it like that, and like people were just like, wow, these developers are so butthurt, and I'm just like, they're clearly having a good time. Yeah. I've also like had conversations with like Lou Studdard, who's like, I guess like the main man at Toys for Bob on Twitter, and he's really chill guy. He was just having a load of fun watching it, and just thought it was hilarious.
One of my favourite comments from one of the developers in that was if they were going to come up in like review meetings of all the ways you were breaking their game.
Yeah. See, the funny thing is that shortly after, well, not shortly after, but like that IGN React happened, and then when they re-released the game on PS5 and Xbox Series X and Switch, a lot of the skips that I did got patched out. Yeah. So like I personally don't believe that was the decision of the people who were watching the Devs React. I think that if anything, that might have been a decision either at some higher up at Toys for Bob or even some higher up at Activision, who was like, well, we can't release this game in this broken state, even though it doesn't actually matter. But like it kind of just became a running joke of like, oh my god, Riko ruined the Crash speedrun by showing it to Toys for Bob, which I don't think anybody actually believes that, hopefully. But yeah, no, I think they were having a good time with it. And even now, like we found a way to get around all the ways they patched it out, so it didn't even matter. And funnily enough, like the PC version of the game for some reason was based off of the PS4 version and didn't patch out any of the skips, so most people just run on the PC version anyway.
So it's just the PS5 that got screwed, kind of thing.
PS5 and Switch. The thing is that the PS5 version still ended up being the fastest version because PS5s have that activity card feature that like every PS5 game, like if you pull up the home menu, there will be these activity cards that say, hey, go do this thing in this game. And in Crash 4, or if you do that at the end of a level screen, like when you cross the finish line, there's like an 8-second animation of Crash or Coco doing their little victory dance, and if you pull up an activity card right at that moment, it pulls you back onto the map and saves like 8 seconds per level. So it ends up where like the PS5 version is like 3 minutes faster in 80%, it's like 5 minutes faster in all clear gems, and in 106 it's like 15 minutes faster. So we ended up having to split the board, so PS5 had its own leaderboard because we're like, that's really unfair, and we're not gonna force people to run on a console that has like a supply shortage.
To this day as well. Still involved.
That being said, I run the game on the PS5 version because I think it's the best version of the game. So like even like outside of the speedrun, I think it is just the most polished version of it.
How did that experience even come about, out of interest?
The finding the activity cards, or
like the IGN.
I just got reached out to by somebody at IGN. I wish I remembered his name, but it's not coming to me right now. He's just one of the main people at IGN. Just reached out and said, "Hey, the Toys for Bob developers want to do a Devs React of the Crash 4 demo, and we see that you've been putting these demo runs on YouTube. Would you like them to do that?" And I was like, "Yeah, absolutely." And then the demo one was such a huge hit that when the full game came out, I was going hard at it because I was really enjoying the game. And he reached out to me again and said, "Hey, they want to do a video of the full game. Are you up for that?" And I was like, "Yeah, absolutely." And I think that was kind of just where things really took off for my channel. Like I had been steadily growing for like a year or two at that point, but that was really the point where my channel like exploded, where I was pulling in a lot of people, where I became viable to like apply for Twitch partner. I actually managed to get it last May. And I think it really all started with that Devs React. I still have people come in and say, "Hey, I watched your Devs React on YouTube. It was awesome, and I'm glad I found you." So it had the bonus of like people finding me on Twitch. People still find me on YouTube also. Like plenty of people will come in and be like, "Hey, I love watching your runs on YouTube," and I haven't even run Crash 4 in a few months. So people are just finding my channel and just watching me play anything from like the PS1 games to like Crash Twinsanity, and they're loving it. And I really think it all started with that IGN video.
To move away from Crash to something we mentioned earlier, which is Harry Potter and the well, for me it's the Philosopher's Stone, but
philosophers, and for me it's Sorcerer, because Americans don't know what philosophy is apparently.
But the PS1 version, how did this speedrun come about, or the interest in this come from?
So I grew up in the late 90s to early 2000s, so I was around for the height of Potter mania. And I know Harry Potter is a bit of a hot topic now just because of J.K. Rowling, but doesn't change the fact that I have a lot of fond memories with reading the books, watching the movies, and all that. And again, this was during the time where with every big movie there was a tie-in video game. And so my sister and I, when we were younger, she got the PC version of Sorcerer's Stone, and I got the PS1 version. And the PC version is usually the one that most people are aware of for the speedrun. The PS1 version was the one I was more interested in because it was the one that I played the most growing up. And it was one of those things where a friend of mine, Dill Wingo, and Dill is known for when he started out as a really good Crash 2 runner, eventually transitioned to Ratchet and Clank 2, and now it's just kind of been bouncing around a bunch of games. But he and I, we both had nostalgia for this PS1 Harry Potter game, and we both checked out the run and we were like, "Whoa, this run's actually really cool. There's a lot of really crazy skips. It seems really neat." And I was like, "Yeah, this might be a run I learned somewhere down the line." But he actually picked it up, started running it, grinding it. He actually had a world record for several months. And I think it just recently got beaten. And one time he tried to submit it to a GDQ, and I told him, "Look, if this gets into GDQ, I'll learn it for you." And it didn't get in. He was kind of bummed, and I was like, "You know what, dude? I'll still learn it." And I sat down and I learned it, and I was like, "Yeah, this run's really fun." And then from there, I had done any percent for a little bit, but nobody really ever touched 100% aside from one person. And I was like, 100% in this game seems like it could be interesting. So I think at AGDQ 2020, I would just sat down in the practice room that they had there, where a lot of people just sit down and just play whatever game they want. And I was just going through the game, reading the guide on how to get 100%. And I ended up accidentally finding 5 minutes of time save in 100%, because what happened is part of the requirements for in the first game is getting a certain amount of every color of beans, and it was already known that you didn't need the red beans, because for whatever reason the reward you got for red beans didn't count for 100% completion, so the run already skipped those, so you only needed yellow, blue, and green. And I went through, I got all the yellow beans, I got all the blue beans, and then in the dungeon I miscounted how many beans I had, and I ended up finishing the dungeon with 79 out of 80 beans, and I couldn't backtrack because Harry Potter on PS1 doesn't let you backtrack. So I was like, crap, I can't finish this, and I would have to start all over to get all the beans. So I was like, you know what? Screw it. I have the basic idea. I'm just going to go through the rest of the game and just pretend I got the reward here. And the indicator that you get 100% is in the final storybook cutscene, when it's saying okay, this is what happened after you beat Voldemort. There will be an extra cutscene where Ron shows up in the hospital and tells Harry "Hey, there's this special wizard card. It has you on it. Also, you have to play Quidditch with Slytherin, even though you're bedridden. Have fun." And like the 100% run ends on finishing that Slytherin Quidditch match because it's the true last thing you do in the run. And I was like, okay, so I'm gonna get through all of this, and it's not gonna prompt me for the Slytherin Quidditch match because I didn't get everything I needed in the dungeon. I didn't get the last beat. And so I beat everything, and I'm like, okay, well, Slytherin Quidditch match is just like, it's like every other Quidditch match, except it's way laggier, so it's like impossible to control. So like I'll have a basic idea of how to do it when I actually learn the run. But then it prompted the cutscene for the Slytherin Quidditch match. And I was like, what the hell is going on? I did not get everything. So I just go through it, and I complete the Quidditch match. I let the credits roll for like 10 minutes. And I check my save data and it says 100%. And I'm just like, oh my God, what did I just find? So I go into like the Harry Potter console server. I'm like, guys, I just got 100% without getting the green bean reward. And then I was like,
exploded.
So I had to, yeah. So I was like, I spend the next week like testing the ins and outs of the game. I was like, do I need the yellow beans? And it turns out that no, you didn't need the yellow beans either. The only things you needed to do were that the reason it happened is that you have to enter certain rooms to get percentage counted for that. And for some reason, all 4 of the bean rooms are considered the same room.
Okay.
So you only need to enter one of them. And the one you have to enter is the blue bean room because it has a wizard card. And the wizard cards are their own requirement for completion. So then the only requirements from there are that you have to at one point enter the Gryffindor common room. And at one point, you have to enter the Great Hall. There are cutscenes that put you in the Great Hall, which are like they're tallying up the house points, and that counts as entering the Great Hall. So you don't have to actually enter the Great Hall. And then if at one point you just look at your list of like wizard cards after collecting one, it will teleport you to the Gryffindor common room and then take you back out, and that counts as entering the Gryffindor common room. So by one accidental miss of a bean, I managed to cut out all but the blue beans from the run. And I took 5 minutes off of that run, and I came home from GDQ, and the record had been sitting at like 205 for a good year or so at that point. And after like 3 runs, I had a 202. And that's kind of just like Harry Potter on PS1 is a game that I ran for admittedly a pretty short time, but I feel like I made pretty significant impacts. And like the discovery with 100% is just like the biggest example of that.
It's great when that sort of happens, especially with like old games when they've been out for so long, and it's just like this one random act. Like, I enjoy Cal Jobst, which I think a lot of people listening will know, being a YouTuber who creates content around generally speedrunning and like 20-year-old games, just new stuff's being discovered now. Mario 64, Gordon Bennett, how long that's been around for, but stuff like strats and stuff still being made now. It's just cool that stuff like that happens.
Definitely. I've even been seeing that with the N-Sane Trilogy, and there was like a lot of like belief that with Crash 4 the N-Sane Trilogy was just gonna like die off, just because everybody was gonna move on to Crash 4. And as it happened, Crash 4 just kind of formed its own community, and the N-Sane Trilogy runners just stuck with the N-Sane Trilogy. And you know, even especially with like Crash 1 and Crash 3, people just keep finding new ways to just optimize it. The world record in Crash 3 any percent on the remake is 3840 something by Potty. And, you know, before that, it was a 38:59, and that was considered like the perfect run, but they just keep finding things. So it's crazy how runs keep evolving years after they've come out. Even like now, Crash 1 and Crash 2 on PS1 are still just having strats developed for them.
Also, looking through some of that Harry Potter footage made me really appreciate games nowadays. Like, I've recently been playing Elden Ring and the new Horizon Forbidden West, and just like the graphic difference, like just like these are like close to real life looking designs, and then you go back to Harry Potter.
PS1 Hagrid is the ideal male human. Like truly the pinnacle of masculinity and what everybody should strive to be.
And everyone listening right now should go on their phones or laptop and Google Harry Potter PS1 Hagrid.
Definitely. One of the biggest Crash streamers and like the main guy for Crash Team Racing, HypnoShark. He also has done speedruns of Harry Potter on PS1, and one of his emotes is called Hypno Proud, and it's just a picture of PS1 Hagrid. So
out of interest for these old games, so PS1 and actually the Game Boy Advance games as well, if someone wanted to speedrun and stream them, how would they technically actually do that?
Well, obviously there's always the option of emulation, which for the Game Boy Advance games, there's no time loss for emulation because GBA emulation is just rarely accurate at this point. If you emulate PS1 games, you do lose some time just because they emulate PS1 console, and PS2s have faster load times because of the fast disk speed option. So that is an option to, if you're getting into Crash on PS1, but eventually if you're dedicated, you're gonna want to switch to console. And from that, there's plenty of options for capture devices. If you're looking for just composite game capture, the go-to for a lot of people in the community is the GV USB 2. It's really cheap, really easy to set up. It's not complicated at all. I have a bit of a more complex setup, which was partly born from wanting to have higher quality video, but also because Crash 2 is actually optimal on the PAL version, and getting a CRT TV in the US that can output PAL signal is basically impossible. So I ended up getting a RetroTink to just upscale to HDMI and play the game off of my monitor with minimal lag. And then with that, I use an HD capture card, which a lot of people that go to is the Elgato HD60, but I use the StarTech USB 3 HD cap and have basically no complaints with it. But basically, if you want to run like a PS1 game, it's really just a matter of finding the capture card, getting the hardware with like the console and everything. If you end up running Crash 2 and you live in the US, you probably want to go the route of the upscaler because the PAL version is just much better than the NTSC version for Crash 2. For GBA games, I actually use a Game Boy player, which I don't know how expensive the Game Boy player like adapter itself is these days. I remember there was a point in time where it was cheap, but the disc was really expensive. But there is also ways to boot up into like the Game Boy player software without the disc. There's a bunch of soft mods that use what's called Game Boy interface, which for example, I use a copy of Super Smash Bros. Melee to soft boot into the Game Boy interface, and it's basically the same thing as the Game Boy player. It's the exact same software, but it's also more optimized to like not be as bad in terms of like inputs or delay or lag. So there's definitely a lot of options that you can go for, but again, with the Game Boy Advance games, you could also just emulate, and it's basically the same thing.
I think one last thing on streaming before we go into some final quick questions. What is it about streaming, aside from the challenge run aspect, that you enjoy doing, or enjoy about it, I should say?
The biggest thing that's fun about streaming is just the community that you build with your chat, and really just the people I get to talk to while I'm sitting here speedrunning these games, or even just playing casual games every once in a while. Just being able to just have conversation with them, laugh with them, maybe having a serious talk with them, help them if they're having a problem, just all of that, and just being able to be open with people like that is definitely my favorite part of it. The reason I actually started streaming is controlling my temper has been something I've always struggled with my whole life, which if you watch me on stream, that might not even seem like I'm the kind of person who ever gets angry in the first place. But the reason I started streaming is because when I was doing these offline attempts, when I first tried to learn, I would get so livid. I'd get so mad. I would just like bang my keyboard, like slam my fist on my desk, try not to throw my controller. And I think something streaming really did for me was teach me how to control that, because it's easy to lash out when nobody's watching. But even if there's like maybe only like 5 eyes on you, you want to be able to control it. At least for me, I find that it's easier for me to control my temper if I know that there are people watching me. Because aside from the whole, like, I don't want to look like a raging, like, crybaby, I also don't, like, I've been in situations where I watch someone get angry. It's so uncomfortable. I don't want to make people feel like that. That was, like, definitely one of the biggest things. It's just the community and just the people you talk to, aside from just, like, it's great just interacting with people online in this way and being able to, like, you know, provide them with entertainment because they enjoy watching me, but also they provide me like a human connection that, especially, you know, like right now with the pandemic and everything, sometimes like just talking to people is all that somebody needs. But then at the same time, it has also helped me learn how to better control the worst aspects of my personality.
I think we mentioned a couple of pieces throughout Nattering. But if there was one piece of advice you could give for a new speedrunner, what advice would that be?
Pick a game that you really want to play. I gave this advice to someone yesterday who was asking me if I wanted. It's like, what game would you recommend to speedrun first? And my answer was whichever one you want to play. Because, you know, if my goal was to just like, if if all I wanted to do was just make it big on Twitch with speedrunning, I'd probably pick up like Super Mario 64. The reason I haven't is because I don't have any attachment to that. Great game. It's not one that I grew up. I grew up with the PlayStation. But I play the Crash games, and particularly I play Crash Twinsanity because I love it. I have fun with those games. And another way to put it, there's a spiral runner, Deo Man, who you maybe have heard of because he's pretty popular. He one time said that when you're choosing a game in a speedrun to play, sit down and play through the game casually in one sitting first and see if you enjoyed it, because that's what you're going to be doing with speedrunning. You're going to be playing a game you love over and over and over. So it better be a game you enjoy. And that's why, like, when people are asking me, would you ever run insert game here? And I'm just like, no, I don't like that game. It's like, I speedrun the Crash games because I love playing them. So if the game you want to run is like Spyro 3, then run Spyro 3. Also, I would say if you are dead set on learning a category, don't be intimidated by how hard it is, because again, I started with Crash to 100%. That is considered a very hard speedrun and way harder than, any percent no game over abuse. But I started with 100% because it was the most interesting to me. And again, going back to Deo Man, he mentioned that if he was going to learn, he was looking into learning Kingdom Hearts 1, and he said he wanted to learn Proud Mode. And I was like, that's a little surprising because Proud Mode is known for being very difficult. And most Kingdom Hearts 1 runners start with beginner. And he basically said, I mean, it's like at the end of the day, anything you speedrun is going to eventually become hard, so you might as well just jump in. And I definitely see what he means by that, because again, like, it's always going to eventually become hard the closer you get to optimizing. So it doesn't matter how hard it is. If you're having fun with it, that's what matters most. Like Crash Twinsanity is probably 100% is probably the hardest speedrun I've ever learned. But I have so much fun with it that it doesn't even matter. Eventually, I just had to jump in and learn it. And I've definitely seen whenever I like try to look into other runs for other games in the series or in other series, a lot of times people say, hey, learn this category first, it's easier, and then from there you can jump into the next one. And if your goal is to like find an easy category to like just test the waters, then I definitely understand that. But I've also had situations where I'd be like, no, I want to learn this category. I don't care how hard it is the one I want to learn. It's what I did with Crash 2. It's what I did with Twinsanity. And it's something I've been mulling over because I've recently been putting into thought of learning Kingdom Hearts 2 as a speedrun. And everybody I've spoken to who runs Kingdom Hearts 2 is like, yeah, start with beginner and don't go into critical mode immediately, because critical is really hard. And like, I understand where they're coming from. They don't want me to just have a bad time learning critical. But I'm also the kind of person who's sitting here and being like, if my end goal is to learn critical, why not just start with critical? Because I'm going to have to learn it eventually. And really, that's just going to come down to like what each individual person is like. Because some people might want to start with the easier stuff and then gradually upgrade to the hard stuff. But you could also have people like me who are like, stare in the face of a run like Crash Twinsanity and be like, I don't care how hard it is, I want to do that. And like, I think Twinsanity was another like big stepping stone in not being intimidated by how hard a run is, because Twinsanity, that run took me weeks to learn. I think I was between jobs in like October of 2019 to like January, and in November I was like, well, I have all this free time while I'm like searching for a new job, I'm just gonna learn Twinsanity. And it took me until like the middle of December before I did a run, because it was just a lot to take in, but I really wanted to learn it. So even if it like takes a lot, I'm the kind of person who's like not intimidated by like the barrier of entry. I think in the entire time since I've learned Twinsanity, there's only one run that I've tried to learn and stopped because at the moment I thought it was too hard, and that was Jack 2.
So if you out there want to go for that Breath of the Wild 100% speedrun for you first, go for it.
Absolutely. If you want to if you want to start with Super Mario 64 120 star, do it. And it's also like another game I've considered learning at some point was Super Mario 3D World, and I've always said that I'd probably want to learn like 242 star or 380 star, and I mentioned that to some guy I knew, and he's like 380 star is really hard, and I'm just like, I'm playing Crash Twinsanity, I don't care. Like,
if one game could be released tomorrow, either announced, unannounced, or a sequel to a game you don't think will ever exist, what game would it be?
Ooh, that's hard. I feel like I could go with like the simple, like obviously, like Kingdom Hearts 4 or Crash 5 or whatever. But I'm gonna go major deep and see how many people recognize this franchise. I want Jet Moto 4.
Say that again, sorry.
Jet Moto. is a really old racing franchise on the PS1, and Jet Moto 2 is one of my favorite games of all time. And the series died in like 1999 after Jet Moto 3, so I would love to see that franchise revived.
God, I remember an old game on PS1 or PS2, I think, called Wipeout Fusion. And just got like nostalgia thing there.
Yeah,
Really enjoyed that. Although I think I'd have the same nostalgia trip of if I went back to it now, it probably wouldn't be as good as I remembered.
Yeah. I think another thing I would like to see, I would love to see them take another attempt at PlayStation All-Stars Battle Royale, because that was a game that I think had a lot of great ideas but was just executed poorly. Especially in the age now where a lot of Smash clones are embracing the fact that they are Smash clones and are not trying to be too different. You know, you see a lot of success with stuff like Rivals of Aether or Slap City or Nickelodeon All-Stars Brawl, and they just embrace the fact that, like, yeah, we're inspired by Super Smash Bros. Melee. Whereas PlayStation All-Stars was like, yeah, we're not really trying to be Smash. We're trying to be our own thing, and I think that ultimately hurt it in the end. So to see them take another attempt at that and do it correctly, I think would be fantastic.
I watched a thing I like about YouTube is, like, in terms of the speedrunning community, is there are so many good documentary or story-based speedrunning videos out there that are really well done.
Yeah.
And one that I watched recently, which is along similar lines, which was about Shrek Super Slam, which is,
oh my god,
is basically the Shrek characters in a Smash Bros kind of setting. And I don't know what the who the content creator was, but a YouTuber did a video on it, and it was a really good video. So I recommend people checking that out. It's great, and I remember playing it as well. It was,
yeah, I had that game on the DS. I never played the console version. I bought it a few years ago, but I have yet to actually like put it in my PS2.
Well, it's growing esports, so there's always chance competitive getting there.
Absolutely.
So there's a large mental aspect to do with challenge running, whether that be speedrunning, hitless running. If there was a time, could you tell a time when a run was taking its toll and how you got past it?
There's definitely been a couple instances with that. I think the best example would be the N-Sane Trilogy version of Crash 2. For the first year or so, when the game was exclusively on PS4, I devoted basically all of my free time to running that game. And I did it because there was really nobody else who was doing it. Like, there was nobody else who was going to hit these milestones with the game, and it got really draining. And it also like kind of has a side effect where I feel like, as cool as it is to have a world record, it also kind of paints a target on your back where you feel like eventually people are just going to want to see you fall. And I definitely felt that during my grind of the N-Sane Trilogy of Crash 2. And the way I got around it was honestly hitting every goal I wanted and then stopping, which maybe not the best option. Just burned myself out to the point where I still don't want to play the game. But it is, I think that's the prime example. Another one I think, which I guess is a more recent example, is, again, going back to Crash Twinsanity 100%. Back in September, I had a real serious grind with that category, where my PB at the start of the grind was like a 121 something. For reference, the world record is like a 109, and it's like really, really insanely good. But my summon best at the time made it so that realistically I could go for like somewhere in like the mid to high teens, and all I wanted was a 119. And I hit the point where my PB was a 120.04, and I was like, I need 5 more seconds. I can do this. And for weeks, I killed a run. And there was one time towards the end of it where my patience finally broke. I got mad on stream. Like I had a run that was like 2 minutes ahead. I was like, this again. I did what I said you shouldn't do. I got attached to a run. I kept making stupid mistakes. Eventually, I ended up finishing a run that was like 30 seconds behind my PB. I got furious. I said many expletives, very loudly, probably concerned my neighbors. And like I had never felt so defeated in that moment, where I was like, what is the point? If I can have it in my hand that much and still lose it, what is the point? And I eventually, like, I took a day off. I tried playing something else. And I asked myself, like, what is the reason I run Twinsanity? And it was basically because I freaking love it. So I was like, okay, you know what? I'm gonna keep doing this. And I went right back into it and just started doing runs. And then one day I got a run that was insane. Like it was just on a crazy pace. And the final time when I finished it was 1:17:59, which was a whole like 3 minutes faster than what I was looking for, like 2 minutes. And anybody who has either seen the YouTube video or was there watching it live will tell you that is the craziest pop off they've ever seen me do. Like I just screamed into the microphone. You can even see in the background my cat like freaks out. She's like, what is going on? And like, I don't know, it's a hard question to answer because there are times where sometimes I just like, this isn't worth it, and I walk away. But then there's times like that where I'm just like, this is worth it, and I recollect myself, whether it takes like a few hours or a few days, and I just keep going until I get it. And it really just depends on, you know, what run you're doing, how much it means to you, and if it's really worth it.
And breaks can be OP as well.
Absolutely, that should not be understated at all. Sometimes like you can be going at it for days and it's just like I'm not getting anywhere, and then you just take a break for a week and you come back and you just immediately nail it. Like I think that one day was all I needed to just recollect myself. And then I've also had moments where, you know, I take you know several weeks, maybe even a few months off, and then I come back and I just immediately get what I was looking for. Like there's a lot of merit to taking a break if you feel like you need one. And I feel like a lot of the times people feel like, well, I have to get this now. I have to do it right now. And you really don't. Sometimes it's better to just walk away for a bit. And when you feel okay with it, go back to it.
It's funny with your first comment about the initial runs and people like waiting for the records to fall. I just had like flashback because I've recently watched the most recent Spider-Man, but the Green Goblin speech from the original Spider-Man.
Oh yeah.
With the hero and the... yeah, sorry.
I mean, the Raimi trilogy is fantastic. So.
Classic. Most recent one was really good as well. I actually really enjoyed it.
No Way Home. Yeah, to not go into the realm of spoilers, but yeah, absolutely one of the best films I've seen recently.
It's absolutely crushing financially as well. It's like considering its own.
Yeah, I think it's like 6th highest grossing of all time, which is crazy because like. The only things above it are like the 5 films that have grossed 2 billion.
And this is during like in the middle, well, not in the middle. It's like the late stages of the pandemic, so less so than.
Yeah, where theaters are still like only now just starting to open up again and all that. And then we had Omicron at the beginning of the year, so a lot of people were just like quarantining again. So it's really crazy that I went against all those odds and just managed to just
crush it,
fly into the top 10. And I think it's like still going up. I'm a bit weird where I like to track movie grosses to see how films are doing, and like I may or may not have fangirled when Endgame beat Avatar and became sad when Avatar beat Endgame back. But just I go back and check Spider-Man every once in a while. I'm like, wow, this movie is still making money. Like it got to like 1.6 to pass Jurassic World. And I was like, okay, yeah, that's about as far as it's gonna go. And I go back now, it's like it's got 1.8. Like, yeah, it's definitely crazy how much that film has been making.
It was a weird one because I'm pretty sure, didn't they like have a re-release in China or something? Like it must have been
Avatar.
Predominantly just so they could get the #1 spot back.
I absolutely believe it was re-released in China just for that.
It's like, oh no, not having that.
Like what other reason? Like, I mean, I guess like there's the next like 3 movies that are finally coming out next year allegedly, but like that had to have been just because Endgame barely beat it. It's like, yeah, let's put it out again. China will watch it.
2009 to 13 years for the first
2019
sequel.
Yeah,
2 more following supposedly.
I mean, I think James Cameron is definitely one of those directors who he'll wait until the technology will be able to do exactly what he wants to do. Because I think Avatar was in production for a good decade definitely. Before he was like, I can't do this with the current technology. Let me wait 10 years.
And on the reverse scale of that, there's the actor John Malkovich has made a film that no one's gonna watch for 100 years. He's
yeah, I think I've heard about that.
So people John Malkovich has made a film that will be released in 2115, and they've locked it away in a safe somewhere, and already sold out tickets to people who have discovered the secret to immortality, probably, because I don't know who's.
Yeah, I'm just like who's gonna be alive for that? Like.
Anyway, sorry, this went on a film tangent. But
yeah,
it's funny because my penultimate question is normally what was the most hype moment on stream, but unless there are other moments that come to mind other than the Twinsanity.
I definitely think that Twinsanity one peaks. I think the other closest one would be, again, back to the Crash 2 N-Sane Trilogy grind. Is I hit the milestone on PS4 of 46 time. The final time I think it was 46:55. Eventually we changed the way we did timing, so it became a 45 something, but at the time it was a 46, and that was like the holy grail like run that I was trying to get in any percent, because my sum of best was like a 46 like 0x. And I still firmly believe that is the best speedrun I've ever done. It was so ahead of its time. I played within less than a minute of my sum of best, which the only other time I've done that is my current like Twinsanity any percent no dimension skip run, which also is admittedly a much shorter category, so the sum of best is going to be smaller anyway. But for like a run of that length, that's the closest I've played to my sum of best. And even now on the console leaderboard, I think it's like 4th place, like 4 years after I set it. And the world record is only like, it's not even a minute faster than it. I think it's like a 59-second faster time. It's like a 44 like 51 or something. So I think that's just like a testament to how good that run is. But my pop off for that run was kind of just like a very solemn, quiet, oh my god, I did it. And like I walk off and you can hear me in my kitchen like just like being like yes. But the Twinsanity one, which I think is my second best run that I've ever done, that one that is definitely the hypest moment. I freaked out when I got that.
And my final question is, what's in the future plans of RikoKSB?
So at the beginning of the year, I had this plan where I was going to try and get a solid time in every single Crash platformer like category, because I had been inspired by watching some of my friends who, like, even if they might not necessarily like a category, they push through it anyway just because they want to see the improvement and they enjoy the improvement. And I wanted to stick to that, but I've decided that I'm probably not going to do that. Combination of I just can't physically play Crash 2 anymore, like to that extent. And I really don't want to speedrun Crash Bandicoot The Huge Adventure after replaying it. It's just not fun. So I had to ask myself, is it worth, am I the kind of person who, even if the run itself I don't think is fun, would I find the improvement itself fun? And I ultimately answered that question with no. To me, it's not worth it. So I changed that plan, and now I'm just gonna like focus on the games that I actually do enjoy. So for the past few weeks, I've been doing Twinsanity again. I got a time I was really happy with in any percent no dimension skip. And out of the 4 categories, there's any percent, there's no dimension skip, there's all levels, and there's 100%. And in all of those categories, at the moment, I have a time that I would say I'm pretty satisfied with. They're all times that I would like to bring down in the future, but for now, I'm content with all of them. So right now, I am considering either returning to Crash 3, one of the 2 versions. I'm not sure whether I would do the original or N-Sane Trilogy first, or returning to Crash 4. And that's kind of where I am right now with speedruns. Tonight and for the next few days, I'm probably going to dabble with all of them to see which one kind of sticks in my head for the moment. And then after that, kind of just see where it goes, see if I want to pick up another Crash game, like maybe do more Entranced or Wrath of Cortex, or if I just want to, maybe try my hands in another franchise. And then I've also been doing, like I said, a lot of Kingdom Hearts 2 randomizer on the side, and I definitely still have plans to do that. But yeah, right now, the immediate future I would say is Crash 3 and Crash 4. And
if people want to check you out, where would they be looking?
So on Twitter, Twitch, and YouTube, my username in all of them is Riko_KSB. Those are really the primary 3 places I do social media. I have an Instagram also, but I literally never use it. I only reactivated it because there's like a web comic I was reading that's only on Instagram, and it's like impossible to use that site if you don't have an account. So, but yeah, really just Twitter, Twitch, and YouTube Riko_KSB is the best place to find me.
Sweet. Well, Riko, I really appreciate you taking some time out for this. I really enjoyed this conversation. I hope you've had a good time as well, man.
I did too. This was fantastic. I had a really good time.
Great to hear. And I hope everyone else has had a great time listening. I hope everyone's enjoyed. And I hope everyone has a great rest of your day, evening, morning, depending on your time zone. And we'll catch you in the next episode. If you enjoyed the conversation and want to hear more with amazing guests, be sure to head over to youtube.com/WayOfLoci, Loki spelled with C, or wayofloki.com/nohitpodcast.